So my name is Micke Adolfsson. I'm a professor of Japanese Cultural Studies here at the University of Alberta. I'm also Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning, so trying to encourage different initiatives on learning, doing research on learning, and also exploring different ways of teaching as well.
My name is Roy. I'm in third year pharmacology.
My name is Jane. I'm in the Faculty of Arts, and I'm doing a double major in East Asian Studies and Drama.
I'm Adrienne, and I'm in my third year of East Asian Studies.
Some years ago, I took a kind of a leap of faith and left everything I had and went to Japan on a scholarship. And it was the best thing I've ever done. I left everything behind me, but it was the chance to kind of see something different and do something that maybe most other people in Sweden had not done. The moment I set foot in Osaka, Japan, I was hooked. It was a culture that was intriguing. It's a culture that takes a while to learn, but also for that reason, very interesting. It's a welcoming culture as well. So one of the challenges we have, I think, is I think we're very good at providing the basics for our students. So like a 100 survey course, for example. It's, you know what content they need, we know what tools they need, and we try to expose them to different readings so they can learn to read them critically, and then we try to encourage them to communicate it as well. The challenge is when you go up to the higher level, when they're supposed to have done those courses, how do you then follow up on that and make sure that they get to actually develop it further? And that was basically what I was trying to get to. How do I get the students to experience a kind of a deeper sense of learning in this case? And so I wanted this course to be a different way that would engage the student more in their own learning. Put it another way, I wanted them to own their own learning. I wanted them to control their own learning. That was really an important thing for me. And then on top of that, they would then kind of learn to develop their communication skills, develop their analytical skills, and develop their own narrative as well. A narrative that might be a little different from what we usually see, for example, on the internet or you're reading guidebooks. So that was the basic concept behind the course. One of my major things as a historian is that there are different narratives, or you could call them tales if you want to actually, of any part of any history, of any nation, right? And every single narrative has a purpose. Some of them are promoted by governments. You don't have to go too far back in history to see when particular histories were written or when you couldn't write negatively about certain things, right? Because it's in the nation's best interest. That's one form of a narrative. And then you have maybe what's more of an academic narrative where you try to let the evidence that you can find guide you, and then maybe you come up with a slightly different narrative, right? And on top of that, then you have the popular narratives. In my case, I often deal with the samurai as well. And as you know, the samurai is one of those mythic figures, and very little what we think we know about the samurai can actually be proven historically. So I'm using these tales to say that there are already narratives out there, but the students were now asked to produce a different kind of narrative, so a different tale if you want to. And so there will always be these competing narratives. What I was hoping they would do, and I think they did very well on that actually, was to produce a narrative that would be more academically grounded rather than the more popular versions that we have out there. My approach is I don't really care how bad or wrong something is when it comes out. I think it's always useful to think of it as just another narrative of something that intrigues the human mind, that is interesting to the human mind, right? And then I think it's our role as public historians to try and infuse ourselves there and give some alternative narratives that might be closer to the evidence that we have in the past. And the students certainly show that they can do that, not just in a kind of in a black or on white, in ink on paper, but actually in a different format that people can understand. And when I looked at the websites just after we started, I mean, there were more hits than we had students, or more visitors than we had students. So obviously someone had gone on there and looked at it. So I do think it has its appeal to do it that way. And I think it's also part, in part at least, our responsibility as kind of, I don't know, public intellectuals or historians to do so. When you do a survey course, you usually are committed to covering a certain amount of time or certain topics, right? When you do a topic course, though, you don't really have to cover everything. So it's more about, to me, it's more about what is it that is important. And most of the time, we will decide that. Now, in order to do that, you really have to have a more of a focus. And having lived in Kyoto, having lived in Tokyo, and being the two most important cities in Japan, I decided to create a course that focused on those two cities. And that would give the students then the opportunity to actually get the focus that they need, but without any further direction beyond that. So I basically set up a fairly narrow framework in a sense, but what the students soon discover, of course, is that there's so much within that that you still have to focus on. The other advantage when you focus on a theme is that you don't have to be committed to a particular time period, right? So we say in Kyoto, it was established in 794, it still exists. So, you know, you got a very long 1200 plus year history there, you can take your pick. That's a lot of different stuff that you can do, right? Tokyo, you know, by comparison is a baby. It's not very old, it's been around for about 400 years, so it's a fairly young city. And in fact, the name is about 150 years old, so it's not even that old. But even there, they have their picks, right? They're huge cities, there are many different things they can focus on. And so part of what I wanted to do is for them to make more decisions on their own on what they're going to focus on. And this is part of the kind of the learning, right? When usually you have everything laid out for you, the professor will tell you, here's what you need to focus on, this is what you need to, you know, memorize or know for the exam. In this course, there are no exams. But they have to decide what is it that is interesting and important about this. And to me, that reflects more of what we do when we are either doing research or when we're out in society. We decide what we think is important, and we make that decision. And I wanted the students to make the same decision. So that's how the focus on the cities are really appropriate for that, because there's enough that they still have to make decisions, but also narrow enough that they won't be completely lost in trying to figure out what they want to do.
Because I had talked to Professor Adolfson beforehand, like in fall term, about the course, I knew it was going to be a little bit different, but I didn't get to see the syllabus until like right before class and then in the first class. So the structure definitely seemed different. It was like, oh, there's no papers, there's no, it's all project-based, no exams, no midterm. Like, it was a little bit weird, but I was kind of excited for it because it looked like one of those courses where you could have a lot of control over your learning.
Honestly, I thought this is not what I signed up for, to be honest. I thought that, you know, because he is such a well-known teacher within that faculty, and he is so highly regarded. I thought that we were going to be, you know, learning a lot from him, but instead he kind of flipped the tables, and we were going to be doing like a lot of learning ourselves. Yeah, so it was very interesting. Like initially, I was kind of freaked out of the whole process of it. So yeah, I was kind of was sort of looking for approaching it with trepidation and fear.
Well, first going into the course, I was expecting the same format of lectures. It was, I was expecting to be very informative, a lot of lecture time with Professor Adolfson lecturing us, but instead we have no rubrics. We had a really rough outline of what we're going to do. There wasn't any. Professor Adolfson normally would have kind of a timeline of which class is going to be on what subject, but instead it was just we're going to be split into 4 groups, working on 4 different projects, and then we're going to come together and teach each other what we have learned during the course. So it was, we just didn't know what we were going to do initially.